Good morning, everyone. It's May 28th, and welcome to the Elevate Academy. We are a place for student athletes, their families, anyone who's a lover of sports to get together, to elevate each other as much as we possibly can. We bring you some of the best coaches, athletes, former athletes, influencers, business executives who can all help you be the best that you can be. Our goal is to focus on the complete person. Elevate your mind, elevate your body, elevate your game, and elevate your life. So buckle up and let's elevate. Today we have leadership expert and author Matt Paknis on the show. Matt, welcome to the Elevate Academy.
Thanks, Dave. Great to see you. Great to be here.
Well, I'm glad you are. And Matt is a senior management consultant with 6 years of college football coaching experience, 10 years of playing football, 5 championship seasons, and he has a focus on lessening bullying in the workplace, which he's an author about. We'll have Matt talk about his book that he wrote. He's been on a lot of different TV shows and interviewed, but he's a former assistant coach at Penn State under Joe Paterno. And he's also spoken publicly about being abused as a child, which I know is a hard thing to talk about. But once again, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
Bring it back to 1980.
I want to jump into some stuff right away. You know, one of the things that's in your wheelhouse and that you're really good at is talking about how to get the most out of people. And, you know, coming off of the recent Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance,
right,
and you're looking at great athletes, looking at a Michael Jordan, a Tom Brady, a Michael Phelps, a Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, all these people. I want to know, when they're performing at their best, they're in that zone. What is it about these athletes that just enables them to get into that zone? Because we have a lot of parents that are watching this, we have coaches that are watching this, and of course we have student athletes. And how do you get into that zone to be the best that you can be?
Well, I think mindfulness is really the key. And that was Phil Jackson's, I think that was his overall mantra: be in this moment. And there are some athletes, I think Michael Jordan is a perfect example, that can just get into that zone. Ironically, I just wrote a rebuttal to the New York Times article. You know, it said, Michael Jordan, champion basketball player, unbelievable marketer, and toxic coworker, question mark. And I said, well, you know, I was on a team that never lost a game for 3 years in New Jersey. I was a sole 3-year starter on 3 consecutive state championship teams. And our coach was an ex-Purple Heart Marine, Ted Monica. And his standards of excellence, which sort of infused through the team, were extremely high. We just expected the best from one another. Maybe people looking at it would say it was bullying. But I think collectively, if you asked any of us, and if you asked anybody on Chicago's Bulls teams, including Scotty Burrell, if they'd be willing to go through it again, they'd say in a heartbeat. Workplace bullying is a different story, and that's why sports aren't always analogous and can't be, you know, clearly translated or transferred to the work environment.
Right.
The physical.
So what did you write in the New York Times rebuttal?
Well, I just said the physical contact is a clear distinguishing feature. There's no physical contact in a corporate America, right?
Right.
In sports, particularly basketball and football, there's a lot of physical contact. And so, you know, there has to be sort of a bar raising and a collective agreement that we're in this together, we're watching out for one another. And I think that's the key, that, you know, Michael Jordan, great teams, great organizations that really are comprised of talent, good coaching, great coaching, luck, timing, you know, just a lot of different factors, including certain leadership styles. There's nothing to say that another leadership style could have even been more effective. Maybe they could have gone undefeated for 6 seasons and at the Chicago Bulls if they had a different style of leadership. So I don't think that's the one factor that pushed them over the top. Unfortunately, there are going to be some, you know, bullying, unhealthy managers or leaders in corporate America or schools that see that film and say, well, Michael Jordan did it and it got them what they wanted. And
yeah,
you know,
I think
so
we're living in a different time though now. I mean,
yeah.
I look back at it as both as a fan and as an athlete. I mean,
Right.
I would have wanted to play with Michael Jordan. You know, that was my takeaway. What
Yeah.
what I liked about it too is we recently did a study with NCAA coaches and asking them what were some of the characteristics that they're looking for in potential student athletes and recruits. And, you know, one of those things that they're looking for is that competitive fire. And
Right.
I was watching that, and it didn't matter whether Michael Jordan was flipping quarters against the wall with his security group, or he was playing a pickup basketball game, or he was playing literally in the Olympics with the Dream Team. He
Right.
wanted to win, and he had that competitive fire, which was just so unique, I think.
Well, I think what the other factor is, if he did that in corporate America, he'd been fired, right? Some of the things that he did to Burrell could be considered assault or battery, taking his lunch, throwing it out. You know, you can't do that. And so, you know, there's a clear line, clear distinction. The other thing is that I think, you know, competition is good, but Michael Jordan was extremely talented. And a lot of times bullies, the perfect mixture of bullying is unfortunately where the kid, his parent, you know, maybe was a great athlete. The kid doesn't inherit because, you know, it's very hard to transfer those genes, be the same level of talent. But, you know, everyone expects the child to be as good or better. And that's what happens to a bully. There are people that are really not that competent, not that good, but they expect themselves to be good. So they attack others that are truly talented. That's the essence of bullying.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that, obviously. And, you know, I think, you know, when we look at, obviously, you know, we're talking about Michael Jordan just because you have The Last Dance going on right now.
Right.
But, you know, I don't care. Change the name. Call it Mia Hamm. Call it Serena Williams. What is it about these elite level athletes that enables them to get into the zone and then not only get into it, but to stay in that zone?
Yeah, well, I think once you're in it, it's easier to stay. The key is you have to suspend yourself and really think about, okay, what is my essence? Often athletes that get in the zone are reinforcing their identity 100%. So if you know, obviously that's Michael Jordan identified as a basketball player. That was him through and through. So his essence was on the floor. You know, people that are in athletics usually have a deep, deep love for their athletics. And that can't really be trained or taught. It's just a love of doing it. I just used to love to play football. Now, not the offensive line. When I played football when I was a kid, I was obviously a running back. You know, it was like Fat Albert. Everyone was bouncing off of me. But you know, I just loved the sport. I just loved the sport. I loved all the sports I did. And so I think that helps when you're right in that moment and you feel as though there's a connection to your unique talent, your unique skills. People are most motivated when they feel in control of their success, when they feel as though their success is reinforcing their identity, and when they feel successful, they feel as though they're being recognized, they feel good. So if people are naturally in that, in the moment, and usually that's what people who are in the moment, who are mindful, which is, you know, more of an Eastern philosophy, being mindful, being in the moment, being at ease. We know that the way of doing that is choice. Deep down, it's choice. Now, to train your mind to get there, the opposite of mindfulness is fight or flight. You know, it's being triggered, it's being traumatized. Right. And, you know, from what I've read, a lot of these sporting kids that start sports so young now, you know, it's traumatic. Parents are yelling, they're screaming. It's not an enjoyable experience. And so,
yeah, I mean, but the interesting thing is, you know, you go back to that because I deal with that because, you know, we have, you know, a few hundred kids in our program and, you know, I deal with a lot of parents. But the one thing I think that we do really well is we kind of set the expectations early on with the parents. And we, you know, we have a rule called NAZ, which is the no a-hole zone. And that goes for parents, players, fans, anyone. We just don't put up with it because
that's interesting. That comment, that specific statement was made in the New York Times article. Would Michael Jordan, as he acted in that video in certain parts in The Last Dance, would he be allowed on the field? Would he be violating the no a-hole zone?
Well, you know, I think there's different aspects of it, you know, and I think, you know, we're also living in a different time. I don't think you can go back and look at it and say, oh, okay, you know, the whole idea, we're educating ourselves, we're learning more, and you get better at it. It's just like, hazing, where hazing used to be a part of it. I was,
Although it still exists. It still
no,
exists.
of course hazing exists and
Yeah.
things like that, but I think we have a better grasp of it.
Yeah.
I think hazing was much more, and especially in sports, fraternities, sororities, things like that, where we learned from that. But what my point that I was thinking about was going back to the parents. And I know, Serena Williams' dad, had them going, the daughters,
right,
early on, and Tiger Woods' dad had them going on and pushing them. And then, you hear about, like
and Tom Brady,
and his dad. But here you had a chance to actually see Michael Jordan's mom and dad. And, the thing that I took away from that is they never pushed him. But what they did is they set their expectations of him. And when Michael Jordan was cut, what did his mom say? His mom said, "Go work harder."
Yeah.
You don't like the result? Change it.
He was cut from his first team, right? When he was a sophomore in high school?
Sophomore in high school.
Yeah. And so, I think that's a great response because it neutralizes you and it takes away, okay, I have these lofty, lofty expectations. I just want to be a kid. I just want to enjoy it. But at the same time, I want to sort of set my standards and my bars. And
but now look at a Serena Williams or a Tiger Woods, right?
Yeah.
And now you're looking at them. You're not really in a team sport.
Right.
It's individual. It's mano a mano. One-on-one. And that's different because now it's just you out there and you're performing. So getting in that zone and staying in that zone. So much of it, I think, it starts with confidence. But where's the confidence come from? The one thing I want all the athletes who are watching this to take away from this is that every one of these athletes we mentioned, and whether it's Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, Mia Hamm, all of them have an exceptional work ethic.
But you also have to say, those are about the highest benches you can set in the world. All those people are gifted. Tom Brady has an incredible ability to read defenses faster than anybody else, and so Tiger Woods is,
but how does Tom Brady, and this is where I'm just gonna maybe we can banter back and forth about it. But I look at Tom Brady and say, well, one of the reasons why Tom Brady is as good as he is, he also works so hard in the off season to be in shape. He's the oldest quarterback in the league, performing still at an incredibly high level.
He pushes himself, but he also
he works his butt off.
He has that one distinguishing feature, and I think every child is born with that. They're born with there's a gift in everybody that they can do automatically easier than 10,000 other people. And the key to sports, I think, is to trial and error, to give it a shot. And, like Michael Jordan, it didn't work out well for him once, but at the same time, some people go back and they just beat their head. Finally, you got to say, hey, there's another avenue for you. You can find another place. Sports, 2% of all the athletes from high school get scholarships. 2% of all the college athletes turn pro. So, it's not like the drive has got to be there. If someone's not able to make something, if a child is not, or a student athlete or a college athlete or a professional athlete is not meeting their expectations, it comes down to one of three things. It's either they're not willing, which we're talking about here, and that's on a spectrum of, are they obstinate, are they ambivalent, are they compliant, or are they committed? So we have to go through those three and say, okay, what's getting in the way of moving up to that willingness,
right,
where you are totally committed, where you love it. And again, I think the whole compilation of these athletes, it's a love of the sport, true deep love that you really can't teach. Maybe it was nurtured, but that's very critical. So the willingness, I don't think, is not a not important thing, but it's just 1/3. The other two, do they have the ability? I've saw kids that work so hard, but it was like, it's just not going to happen. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, do they have the capacity to really do this sport and do it well? Yeah, it's a very honest question. I think it's fun for sports. The essence of sport, based on its Hellenic founders, is to, number one, improve the person, test human limits, test human abilities. But number two, to take those concepts and make society better. How can we constantly make society better? And so, I think we have to keep that in mind, that really the essence of sport is to make this child a better person, not necessarily a better athlete. And
Well,
so
I agree. And that's why, the Elevate Academy, we focus on mind, body, game, and life.
there you
It's
go.
not just let's be the best athlete. That's not what it's about. And, we want to help kids become leaders. We want them to learn life skills from what we're teaching them, both here at the Elevate Academy and both when we're on the field with the kids. It's those life skills that they're able to use that will carry on with them for the rest of their lives, not just in the years that they are an athlete.
Right. Well, and the third key bucket is, are they allowed? And that's really the coach's realm. Do we
I think
give them
today it's not just coaches, it's coaches and parents.
Oh, it's everybody around them. Do they have the nurturing? Do they have the support? Do they have the background? What was fascinating for me, like I said, I played, I was a sole 3-year starter on 3 consecutive undefeated high school football championship teams in New Jersey. And I blocked for guys and played with guys that went to Penn State, Michigan, Syracuse, Boston College, Temple, you name it. We had 15 Division I scholarships on the team when I was a sophomore. I was a sole sophomore starter. 15 of the guys on that team from all 3 years ended up getting full rides to Division I schools, major Division I schools. And we were just a small school in New Jersey. We were like Hoosiers.
Right.
So I had this experience that I think a lot of parents, particularly in that tri-state ultra-competitive area, really would love to see their child have. And when I got to Brown, the community was around us, the coaches were around us. You'd walk down the street and shop owners would come out of the front door and yell out your name. I mean, it was just like this unbelievable experience. And then when I get to Brown, my mom died my senior year during the season. My dad remarried within the year. So that support system sort of went away. And I went to Brown, and at Brown, it was probably a very good thing for me. But if you're over 6'3" and over 240 pounds, and you're white, male, and you're heterosexual, you're not really, at least when I was there, you're not really embraced. And so, did it turn out to be a great experience for me? Absolutely. But it was not a welcoming experience for me. And I needed that at that time. So,
I'll tell you flat out, my experience too at Brown, I came as the bio pre-med major because I wanted to be a doctor. And my first academic advisor that I had, who was my biology professor, hated athletes. And he made it very clear. There were two other athletes.
That's really liberally minded. Excuse me for interrupting you. That's liberally minded.
No, yeah, but you have a situation where there's 3 athletes in the class, and he referred to everyone, and it was a small class, the first one that we were in, and I think there were 22 kids in the class, and 19 of them were called by their first names, and 3 of them were called by their last names. And so finally, and he was my academic advisor. I'm like, let me be. And I said to him, I stood up for myself and said, do you just not like athletes? He's like, yeah, I really don't like athletes. And I'm like, well, do you get to know them?
In all fairness, there was a crew ahead of us that probably deserved that, moniker, or deserved that classification. But then
you had other professors like Dean Hazeltine, who was probably one of the most famous professors at Brown. And,
he was open-minded.
You're talking to your teammates. You're talking about, trying to find great classes to take that are interesting and different. And I had no concept. Everyone's like, you got to take Engine 9. And here's the thing. This goes back to, you talked about love, and you talked about really wanting to do it. Well, all you need to do is take one class with Dean Hazeltine, and you fall in love with him, and you realize how much fun he makes the class. I ended up taking 4 engineering classes because of Dean Hazeltine.
Talk about someone that's in the moment, that's able to be mindful. And that's what everyone experienced. I mean, he could wrap a crowd of 300 students around his finger in a second. And he'd also know all their names and recognize them. So he clearly, not only did you love him, but I think a lot of the reasons why people go to his class and admired him so was because he loved them. And they got that sense from him. And I think there are 2 major motivators in life: fear and love. And those two, people are motivated to seek pleasure or to avoid pain. And those two are really at the genesis of real. And I get a sense, coaches, Tiger's dad was probably very disciplined. The Williams sisters, their dad was extremely disciplined, but they also incorporated an awful lot of love. When you hear them discuss that situation, it was discipline, it was hard work, but they really sensed the love and the connection. I think that's what maybe at the root. I remember my dad being on his knees when I was a little guy, and we played. I'd want to play for hours in the living room, and I would just try to get by him with the football. And my dad was a big guy, and he said, "Okay, that's enough." And no. I just loved it, and I think at the deep root of all great athletes is that sense, because love as a motivator, having passion, having that real passion is something that outweighs any fear or pain.
I just pulled something up on my phone because yesterday I was out on my walk and I was listening to a podcast with Brendon Burchard, who's the author of Atomic Habits. I'm a big Brendon Burchard fan. I love it. He's got a great show called The Brennan Show. And he never has guests on. It's just him talking. And yesterday he had a guest on, Ben Greenfield, who's a famous trainer. He trains a lot of people. Right. He's unbelievable. And it was interesting what Ben Greenfield said. And I brought up his quote. And Ben said this: "On your path to winning at life, consider this. Whatever your purpose is, make sure you're thinking back to what you really loved doing as a kid. I guarantee that it will put you into the flow state now. That's one way to ensure that your purpose statement actually aligns with what puts you into that flow." Love, purpose.
That's it. And so, really the essence of, if you've ever been in a zone, like when I write, I'm in the zone. My mind just wraps around it. I was an architect. I designed my own architecture curriculum at Brown. Again, my Brown experience ended up being wonderful. And I really love my classmates, love the students, love the faculty. But that first, I think in part of it had to do with just what was going on with my personal life. Tremendous upheaval.
Sure. I mean, listen, you went through a traumatic event, with your mom passing away.
But in in retrospect, Brown was the perfect choice for me. It really turned out to be a wonderful experience. Met my wife through Brown. Had a family. I mean, it's just been a great, great experience. So I don't want to.
We were talking about.
I want to encourage great athletes and great, and excuse me for stereotyping, but Caucasian, large men who are strong and good athletes. I want to encourage them going to Brown because I think it's probably the best school in the country for them to open their mind and really experience things maybe from a different perspective and become better.
Well, listen, I came from, first of all, I'm a blue collar kid. I ended up basically being forced to go to Chaminade High School, which is an all boys Catholic high school. And for the first year and a half, I would be honest, I hated it and didn't want to be there. And it was also super competitive, where I was used to being the best player on every team that I played. No matter what the sport was, I was usually the best player. And when I got to Chaminade as a freshman in 9th grade, well, there's 110 kids trying out for the team. 110 kids. And all of a sudden, you're just one of them. And same type of thing. But as time went on, what I realized was it was the discipline that I needed that Chaminade provided. But Chaminade we were diverse in socioeconomic, but I think there were only 3 black kids, in the entire school. And, I come to Brown and, my team, my football team freshman year was as diverse as it could be. And, and that's one of the things I loved so much about Brown was you literally had this uniqueness of so many different people, so many different thoughts, and I love that. I love having true, honest debates. And what's kind of cool is, on Tuesday night of this week, we had a leadership group from our class of 1989. And this isn't athletes, it's the actual class of 1989 leadership group. And just having great talks about, how can we be different? And, one of the conversations that we were having is, let's not just do what every other class did and focus just on our reunion. Let's be game changers here, and let's change how we interact with one another. And I just think that that's one of the cool things about Brown is what does it do? It enables you to think differently.
Well, what I found too was pretty funny was, I think there's a mindset. There's also a lot of, sort of double speak. My first friend in this world is an African American. I lived in a very mixed neighborhood in Madison, New Jersey. In our elementary school, I was in first, second grade in 68 and 69. The Newark riots were about 15 miles away where people were being killed for the color of their skin. And I had these best friends that we just went to school to play. It must have been a tribute to our parents, the staff, the faculty, the town leaders. We had no sense of racism in our elementary school. And I know a lot of people say that's impossible. So I get to Brown, and I think everyone jumps to the assumption that, I'm white bread. I come from white bread. All my friends when I was a kid were African American, and so, I got this sense that we got to indoctrinate this guy, teach him. And I was like, no, I'm used to this. These are my best friends. So
yeah.
I found that, so they jumped their own mental models, so everyone's got to do that. I think it's critical. And again, that's getting back to sports and getting back to being in the moment. Sure. And this all ties together is that, suspension of mental models and suspension of opinions and fears and criticisms. That's what enables someone to really take over. Granted, you got to be toned, you got to be ready, you got to be prepared. But, when you talk to Tom Brady or Tiger Woods or any one of those great athletes that we've been referencing, or any great athlete that's able to zone in a moment, probably the greatest example of this, and it's been documented on TV, are the Manning sons. And I just watched that again, the special on, I think on ESPN or the SEC channel about Archie Manning. But the love that those two boys received from their father, the unconditional love, at least as it's described in that program, really showed me that I think this theory of passion and love and just a sort of this root seated connection between something you really cherish, like the love of a parent, with the sport. I think that might be the genesis of a lot. And obviously then you just have the freaks that just have incredible athletic ability, but they don't ever get to the level of the athletes we're talking about. And I think that's because it's that willingness to zone in, to be in the moment so they can be their essence and really feel as though, that they're almost like on a higher call. at that moment, they are who they are, and they're able to demonstrate it. And I
was watching a special on Lindsey Vonn, the Olympic skiing.
That's another good example. She's another good example.
You watch her, and I think the thing that's was really the takeaway for me was how much visualization she has to do. And I was talking to a big time skier about it, and I was like, what's amazing is you're watching Lindsey Vonn, and she's in, this is when she's maybe the second person behind, ready to go. She's like in the on deck circle, and she's literally visualizing the race, and she's going through everything in her mind. And I'm like, I love that so much. And the person I was talking to said, well, listen, there's a reason why she also does it. It's a very unique sport because a football field is 100 yards long, and a soccer field is the exact whatever the width of the soccer field, right. And lacrosse field's 110 yards. You have that. Where in skiing, the race that they're going on and the mountain that they're on changes every week. And not only does the mountain change every week, but the mountain itself changes race by race, conditions, wind, snow, rain, whatever it may be. So the visualization techniques that she uses to get herself in that mindset, in that moment, I just love it.
Well, the other thing is too, within that framework of a football field or a soccer field or a lacrosse field or basketball court, that dynamic changes. There's no control over what's going to happen at the next second. And that's what great coaches do. They try to get players to think about, okay, I can't dwell on the past. My coach from high school just passed, Ted Monica from Madison. I had mentioned him. He just passed in March, and I was one of his eulogists. And really two of his mantras stuck with me. The first was, the only play you control is the one you're in right now. And so that is your job, to get that play done and to do your job during that play. You can't look ahead. Like I said, we were ranked 3. We ended up in the poll rank. Although we were undefeated in state championships, they have an overall ranking. This was before our overall playoff system started. And so we were 11-0 for all 3 years. We had
By the way, it's something that I love that New Jersey does that I wish more states would do, is that New Jersey ends up having a tournament of champions.
Yeah.
In New York, whether it's, lacrosse or football as an example, they will have a Class A champion, and it's based on the size of your school, a Class B, a Class C, a Class D champion, where in New Jersey, you have those champions, and then they play each other.
Yeah, exactly. And they do that up in some sports in Massachusetts too, is where I'm at now. But he never said championship, never heard the word championship out of his mouth. He goes, if you take care of the next play and you follow and learn your technique and do everything correct on every play, the rest is going to take care of itself. And that's what it did, Right. And so I was, really fascinated. We had an extremely talented team that showed up at Brown because we recruited. Brown had made an agreement to have a home game with Penn State in 1983 and 1985. Well, after we played them in 83, they canceled the 85. They say it was for injury, but it was because we got pretty close. I think we scared them. I think we had over 410 yards offense. We lost 38-21, but I think we were close. We might have been 21-21 in the third quarter, making national news. And they were the reigning national champs. And so we were loaded. And we just destroyed our freshman competition. As you know, when you played, you had a standalone freshman program in the Ivies. But yeah. I think really they said for other reasons, but the real reason is admission spots. These schools are so competitive. These schools were reserving 40, 60 admission spaces just for football every year. And it couldn't be sustained. And so we were fortunate enough to go through that. But we were like, wow, is this the Ivy? There were a lot of guys on our team that had received Division I football scholarships from major schools. And the Ivy League there was much more priority because there were a lot more kids. We were just at the end of the baby boom, and there were a lot less football programs, Division I football programs. So you had a ton more people. So there was much more parity. Yale played BC, I think the year we played Penn State, played them tough, didn't win, but played them very tough. We played Army every year or on a regular basis. We played William and Mary on a regular basis.
I hated playing against Army, and I originally verbally committed to play football and lacrosse at West Point, but I hated Army because of their wishbone offense, and as a linebacker, It was like, oh my God, it's just
they're coming for you.
Yeah, it's the linebackers are getting the crap beaten out of them, and I hated
the artillery. The artillery's coming at you.
Oh, the whole game, nonstop.
Yeah, I did too. That's ironic because I actually told the coach at Brown I had responded so well to my high school coach's tutelage, sort of military organized approach, and I just translated all that. Being in the zone, I think is a real very pertinent topic for me because when I was in third grade, I think my mom, I know she was diagnosed with melanoma. She had a huge scar or mole that changed color and shape on her back flank. And it was in her system, in her lymph system. So she had over 2,000 stitches to remove her whole lymph system. She was in the hospital all the time.
Crazy.
My father, was stressed out of his mind, and he couldn't contain his fears and anger and rage sometimes, and took it out on the back of my head unexpectedly. And then, and then I was targeted when that kind of thing is happening in the house. Predators know it, like they can almost sense it. And so I was easy prey, 9, 10 years old. And so I was assaulted and abused by a neighbor. So I went into a coma, basically. I had been this high functioning kid, loved every moment, just in the moment all the time. And I went in my head. I had OCD. I was afraid to leave the house. No one really knew why. They assumed it was due to my mom's sickness. But the real two drivers were the abuse, different forms of abuse that were going on. sexual abuse outside of the house, physical abuse inside the house, domestic violence. And so, I just, my grades plummeted. I couldn't concentrate. My mind was scattered. I think it was a defense mechanism to help a kid, sort of survive. Normally people
Right.
that have this happen to them end up, being on drugs, committing suicide, that kind of thing. But in her wisdom, so my mom was given about a year. And as I mentioned, she lived to be till I was a senior in high school. We were 9-0. We were going in the state championship game. And they called and she got to say goodbye to her. She's losing consciousness. So I said goodbye to her on that Sunday. She waited for my sister to return from Wyoming Tuesday night, and she died just before midnight Tuesday night. And then I remember my dad coming home. We got to get the boys up, and I asked, hey, do I have to go to school tomorrow? Can I practice? And because there was a rule, if you didn't go to school, you couldn't go to practice, and they let me do that. And I felt like, wow, I hope I'm not breaking the rules. You're so, when you're a kid, you're so concerned with that. And then my mom was buried on that Friday. We had our state championship game against Orange on Saturday, and it was the only game in our 33-game streak that we were behind at halftime. And they featured a kid named Sammy Seal. He was the fastest kid in New Jersey 2 years in a row. I think he played in the NFL as a defensive back for 12 years. And so we contained him. He had one long run in the first half, and that was it. And I was two-way, I was a three-way, one-way offensive tackle, starter and offensive tackle. But my junior year, I always did short yardage defense as well and special teams. My junior year, one of the tackles got hurt, and I took over. Actually, the first play I was in, the night before, they had a film called Lineman's Dream. And I had a lineman's dream, my first play. We went in, we sacked the quarterback, the ball bounced out, and it bounced in my hands, and I ran 40 yards for a touchdown. And then the team pigpiled me, obviously. But anyhow, we played Orange. Sunday, we had to take our SATs, and then my senior year Thanksgiving game, after Thanksgiving, we won, and my mom, that was the first time I didn't have a Thanksgiving with my mom, and we went out to a restaurant, which was, I'd never done. So it was all this crazy stuff, but being a part of that team was just like this magical experience. It kept me focused. It kept me nurtured. I had a network around me. I was able to keep my mind on a goal. I had all those things. I was very willing.
Right.
God, I was blessed. I was able, and I was allowed, and I'd run through the wall for my coach. The getting back to the frenziness of my mind. So my mom, when I was in 7th grade, said, this isn't good. I was afraid to go to school. I was not truant. I made a good appearance outside publicly. I knew how to smile, and but I just was miserable on the inside. And so I got counseling, and in the counseling sessions, it got to the point where I built the trust, and I shared what was happening. And this counselor, I guess the mandatory reporting laws weren't the same, but he, helped me stop all the forms of abuse in my life when I was just an 8th grader. So I was like a 13 or 14-year-old, and that had a tremendous empowering effect. And it took about a year for my mind to wind down, and then getting a part of that very special football program, having some other amazing things happen in my life, allowed my mind to settle, and I was really able to focus. It was like heaven, because I loved school, but I just couldn't focus for like 4 or 5 years in school. It was miserable.
Well, I would tell you, Matt, one of the things I think is really important, and not to add to the being a coach is tough today, and tough because of the pressure. It seems like parents are never happy, with coaching, and the complaining or whatever it be. Luckily for me, and I think it's because you set the tone, you set the table the right way.
Right.
The results are better. But the one thing I would tell you is, listening to your story, I had a similar story myself with, abuse in the home. And the one thing I would tell you, and I'm in the process of writing my book right now, and I keep going back on the title, but, in essence, what it is that 2 things saved my life: sports and school. Those are my safe places. I wanted to be playing sports as much as I possibly could, because I was out of that abusive home situation. And so constantly playing sports. School. I was always good in school, always had, A pluses and great grades. So those were the 2 constants that I had. But the coaches out there, I was blessed. I was completely blessed with unbelievable coaches. And I remember my Little League coaches. I was a baseball player up until ninth grade. I loved baseball. I was a catcher. And but when I got to high school, I had to make the switch because baseball and lacrosse were the same season. And up until then, I had been doing both. I played
Wow.
baseball and lacrosse. I did both. And at Chaminade, I couldn't, and I had to make that decision. But, I remember. And the funny thing is, I don't even remember his last name. I just always called him Coach George. But he was a New York City cop. He was my baseball coach from probably third grade to ninth grade. And he made me love the game of baseball. And
There
just
it is. There it
a
is.
phenomenal coach. But I also, in the back of my mind, as I think about it, I think he had a sense that something was wrong in my house. So he was the guy to pick me up. I mean, I remember specifically the New York Islanders were playing the Stanley Cup Championship. And it was my birthday. And I had a lacrosse game that day. And I think I was in either 7th or 8th grade at the time. And my mom and my sister were huge Islander fans. And they had tickets to go to the Stanley Cup that night. So they left my game, my lacrosse game. They're like, listen, we're going to go. And I remember Coach George picked me up at my lacrosse game. And
Now,
his son didn't play lacrosse.
just to interrupt,
Picked me up.
in this day and age, that wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, no. And drove me to my baseball game. And
now, you were very fortunate. He was a good man.
He was.
You were at a time and at a place where you would be a target for a predator like Sandusky, and so fortunately we've become aware, and God bless that Coach George for being such a good man. And the people say that about me too, and the counselor had you. I'm in that room for 45 minutes to an hour once a week with this guy. There are bad people that get into those kind of situations just to exploit a child like us, or like.
But I also think about it as a coach, though, because I've had some experiences with my kids where it's kind of like, your spidey senses go off, and you're like, something's not right. Something's just not right.
Too much connection.
And luckily, for me, in two of these instances where I was dealing with two of my kids that I've coached over the years, my instincts were right. And there was something wrong, and we were able to uncover.
Did you report them? How did it work out?
One was more of just a bad home life, and it was very rough on the player. But the other one was a sexual abuse situation, and but at the time when I was dealing with it, she had played for me, so she was an adult in college, and but I basically helped her get through that situation by finding the right support and help, etc. Because she was trying to do it on her own, and it was a really hard situation. But I think two ways. The good coaches, people like you, people like me, be wary. If you see a kid that's, something's wrong. And then the other thing too is as teammates, be aware of what's going on with your kid. If you see a change of attitude, if you're seeing someone who, that's just not them. They're not acting the way that they normally do. Reach out, see, hey, you okay? Something simple like that, but that could change a kid's life.
Well, one of the reasons why I do what I do, I was a coach on the staff with Sandusky. I was offensive. I ran the offensive look squad. So he was a defensive coach. I worked with him every day, and because he ran the first team defense, obviously.
Right.
And those kids were always around. And I actually met Matt Sandusky, who was being adopted at the time. And he's the one member of the family that's come out and told the truth. But, and he's paid for it significantly. He's been, shunned by the rest of the family and by the rest of the community for that, which is absolutely absurd. He should be rejoiced.
Yeah.
And I always thought, and I'm not just saying this in retrospect, it's one of my life's greatest regrets is just not knowing more. I never saw him, but he was a weird dude. He really, he was always grab-assing the kids during the camps. We were one of the first schools to have those summer camps, and we ran triple sessions for the kids in the summer. And those, and they did it really I think, to get around an NCAA rule, because we invited our prime and premier recruits, sophomores and juniors in the East, to come up to the camp so we could really look at them full time. But they'd also have a week to, an opportunity to really get sort of wined and dined at night and looked around and see the campus and really get to know the coaches. But then you had all these other kids that just showed up, right? Because you had it open up to the public. You couldn't just have your athletes there. And he'd be grab-assing those kids. And I actually asked him one time, I said, Coach, it made me uncomfortable with my background. I was like, Coach, I thought we were only supposed to touch the kids if we're teaching technique and there's like 20 other kids in front of us or other coaches. And he goes, I just love the kids. And another time he was like working, I was lifting with the guys on the offensive line and I went by him. He was on a bike. I'll never forget it, in our weight room. And he goes, and we were talking about something about practice, and I had an odor. You may experience it too, Dave, if you're around someone that's a predator. It's a very eerie experience. And I just looked and I said, nah. We were reigning national champs. He was this, glorified defensive coach, probably the.
I mean, they wanted him to be the next head coach when Joe Paterno retired.
It was unbelievable, and I was like, I was 24, I think, at the time, and I just said, nah, it can't be. I said, it's just, but I just like walked away. And then, 2011, I read about it. I was in a business trip. After coaching for 6 years, I got an MBA and I created my own business. And that's how I learned about bullies. People found me easy to talk to and approachable and trustworthy. And so they share these crazy stories at work. And then in 2011, the guy that I played next to at Brown, Jeff Trogger, he's a judge now in Pennsylvania. But he left a message. I got back from a trip from Europe, and I got home. I took all my voicemails, and he said he and I were always called. His receptionist at his law firm before he became a judge was not a sports fan. So like when the Red Sox beat the Phillies in the World Series, I called and I said I was Pedro Martinez. And she had no clue who Pedro was. So she would broadcast, Mr. Trogger, Attorney Trogger, Pedro Martinez is on the line for you. And everyone in the law firm would run into his office and goes, nah, it's frickin' Paknis, right? I did that at least once a week, right? So anyhow, I get this message from quote unquote Jerry Sandusky. It says, Matt, I'm in really bad shape. Can you call me? Now, I had not shared or disclosed any of my childhood or anything to anybody. Right. Well, I wrote a letter in 1997 to my hometown, which was 14 years before the Sandusky, thanking my coach, because Sports Illustrated had come out with an article asking who's coaching your kids. And it had, the front page of the article had all these mugshots of these predators, these pedophiles that were able to come into these towns and coach soccer, while the parents knowingly knew they were assaulting one or two kids. But because they were getting a winning Little League soccer team, they allowed these guys to continue. I mean, the value, what the hell's wrong with our people? Protecting kids should be the number one rule and making them better in our society, right? So anyhow, in rebuttal to that, I wrote and disclosed my past and said, my coaches here in Madison High School, my football, wrestling, track coaches, anybody I was exposed to, Ted Monica and Jack Francis in particular, saved my life. It's a fact. It's a fact. They were good. They protected me. They taught us the right thing. They taught us the right way. Whereas, these horrible, horrible predators. So anyhow, 2011, I get in and Trogger, I get this message. And so I go online and I just type in Sandusky. And that was about 12:15 when I got home in the morning. I stayed up all night and read the full court disclosure. I cried. And I just said, oh my God, I could have prevented 24 years of him predating and predating and really horribly assaulting these children. And so I've dedicated my life to that. Especially, it all came together. Mark Twain said, the two best days of your life are the day you're born and the day you figure out why. Well, that night I figured out why I'm here. And it just, it was a compilation of my tough childhood and working with Sandusky and having the football and teaching and been exposed to incredible teachers like Hazeltine, it all fell together. And so, it got picked up by, I wrote a quick note to a writer for the Washington Post. He wrote a story on me, and then that took off, and I interviewed with a lot of different organizations, and it really sort of guided me to where I am today. I started with my book. I submitted it's another 1 in a million story, but I had addressed a workplace shooting risk at a former client, and they asked, and it was actually, I had gone to work for them full time after working for them as a consultant for about 12 years. And I had companies like this all over the country. And then I said, oh, it's time for me to maybe slow down and, do something, more consistent. And there were a couple workplace shooting threats concerns, and they wanted to ignore them. And so I was put on it's sort of like teach me. And they said, well, why don't you take some time off and think about what you want to do with this report that had come back after I did my due diligence and did a full-blown investigation, and it came back and it wasn't good. And they said, why don't you take some time off? Well, in that 30 days, they gave me time off. I put together a manuscript, but it was just it wasn't on that experience. It was on my life. Right. And within a month, I had 2 book deals. And so that's unheard of, I guess. I don't know. But the chief editor told me that she'd been in the industry for 50 years and she'd never seen it happen. So they actually gave me the title of the book, Successful Leaders Aren't Bullies: How to Stop Abuse and Build at Work and Build Exceptional Organizations. That book was based on my professional experiences that we're going to lead with that one. But the big book is your book about overcoming a childhood nightmare like you did. And that's going to be my second book. And so, it's just sort of destiny. I mean, it's not all easy. It's very challenging to sort of, I think, follow your dreams or follow your calling. I'm a deeply religious but privately religious person. And, I think we all have a calling, there's a reason we're all here. And so, I'm just concerned that, there are still coaches out there like a Sandusky or like those soccer coaches that may be exploiting neighborhoods. The second thing,
or the doctor at Michigan State with the
doctors,
USA gymnastics.
A lot of times it's people that project an image like Penn State did. That's a false image. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is, right? And so the other thing, and you mentioned this, the thing that really stuck in my mind, the other statement about my coach Monica, was that he would always say, we're only as good as our weakest player. And he might have used a little more choice language than that, but he goes, if you are that person, you better work your tail off to get better, because you're going to dictate how good we are. But more importantly, if you know that person, you better help them get better. And that was the mentality that we brought to our team. And, I've read a lot recently about some of the great Ohio State teams, some of the great professional teams. So what really distinguished this team? They said, well, it's not like everyone obviously wants a goal. They have a common goal. Everyone knows the roles. Everyone knows processes. There's healthy relationships. But on those teams that really excel, and I had this for 3 years in high school, is you feel as though the guy working next to you has got your back. Everybody around you is just, they're looking out for you and you're looking out for them. There's this bond that can be cultivated, but I think it takes a compilation of special kids, special coaching, just a special atmosphere to really create that. And when that happens,
I don't know too many people who've had the opportunity to have 3 state championships and to go undefeated their entire high school career. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, any given week, right? You could slip up. They're kids. We're kids. I will tell you 2 quick stories that give you an indication of what my coach meant to me and how he knew to motivate people. I mean, he was not a touchy-feely guy by any stretch of the imagination. He was like, you will enjoy this, right? But he said, I did miss one game. I started for 3 years, but my senior year, the last game my mom saw, this is a picture of her at the game. My friend Brian Finley took a picture of it.
You got to zoom out a little bit.
How's
there
that?
We go. Yeah, great picture.
Yeah, she had, I think, 2 or 3 weeks left in her life. I was 17. I was one of the co-captains. And she was given permission to watch the game. Like, again, I was like, wow, can she really do that? Like, no one said, of course she can. But she had to watch the game from my car, inside the car, because she was so weak and her immune system was so vulnerable. But that's the last game she watched, and it was against Summit my senior year, and I twisted my ankle. I had actually twisted my ankle the previous spring, severely throwing the discus, and I re-injured it that game. So I was actually carried off the field, and then I missed the game the following week. I think we were playing Verona or West Orange. I've got to figure out which one. And before the game, I was like, wow, this is weird. This is the first time that pre-game was like, talk about being in the zone. I just loved it. You're getting all ramped up.
Yeah.
You're getting ready to go.
And now you're on crutches on the sideline.
I'm on the crutches on the sideline. And, I'm not really feeling sorry for myself. And I'm not just saying this, but I'm like, God, I'm letting the team down. I feel bad. And I look over, and my head coach, Ted Monica, underneath his customary maroon coaching jacket, which he was buried in actually, is my 77 game jersey. He was wearing my game jersey during that game. And I was like, he never said, he never told me, he just did it. He was that kind of guy. He didn't tell you, he showed you. He showed you that he loved you. He showed you that he loved football. Wasn't a full lot of words, but his actions meant tremendous amount. And that's what I think great coaches do.
Yeah, well, listen, I've kept you on here long enough on this Elevate Academy show. We're talking about so many things, but we got to wrap it up here. And as we wrap up, you talk about a great coach. Our prior guest was Dom Starsha, who was the head coach at Brown.
Oh, say hi to him. And
he was my head coach, and
he's the best.
And then he went to Virginia. Dom was a 2-sport athlete. Never played lacrosse in high school. Came to Brown, and someone said, "Hey, you should come out and play lacrosse, in the spring." And he's like, "Okay," and ended up being All-American. Played on Team USA. And
well, talk about a guy that's the essence of loving a sport. He was like, he loved that sport.
He loved lacrosse more than football, and he came as a football player.
The lacrosse team shared our locker room. The football coaches, when I coached at Brown in 85 and 86, the coaches and the coach from the lacrosse team and the Brown football coaches shared the locker. So I used to talk to him and Lasagna, and they were just great guys. Well,
the amazing thing that people don't realize is that up until literally probably maybe 7-8 years ago, the football team and the lacrosse team still shared locker rooms. They didn't have a full year locker room.
Right.
And that was unheard of at other universities. Like, wait, you don't have your own locker room? No. When football season's over, take your stuff out. Lacrosse is moving in. Lacrosse season's over, take your stuff out. Football is moving in. And finally, they have their own locker rooms.
It's disgusting now, really. I mean, when I showed up, we had the Aldrich Dexter Fieldhouse. There was the promise to have this Olney Margolis. I guess the weekend that I was up on my recruiting trip, they had signed it, but they might have said that to every recruiting weekend, right?
Yeah.
Big splash, they presented it. And then we were the first class. There was a AstroTurf field on the roof, and us linemen obviously joking around. I was a sophomore.
Wait, you got to slow down there, because people are just going to skim over that. They built this athletic facility at Brown, which was state of the art, and on the roof was a full turf field on the roof and that's where we practiced every day for lacrosse.
Don't they play games up there, lacrosse games?
We played one game in our career there. We played Holy Cross. We were supposed to, because the sidelines, you really couldn't have spectators up there. And the roof was only about 4.5, 5 feet high. It did have netting around.
The parapet wall.
Yeah.
Well, I got two funny stories. So the first day we're up there. We're the first class up there. And, we're funny offensive linemen. By the way, number 1 tackle, number 2 center, number 3 is quarterback, number 4 guard for the overall average Wonderlic scores on the NFL test that I took it after my junior season. Probably took the average down for tackles, but 3 of the top 4 IQ. So we're always joking around, always making silly comments. We were jumping. And our line coach, Jack Charney's like, "Oh, guys, easy." You could tell he was really nervous.
You're going to go through the roof.
we would go through the roof. Anyhow, we had 2 years later, we were up there practicing, and they, like you said, it was just a parapet wall. Now they have nets and fences, and someone finally said, someone could fall over that thing pretty easily. We had a guy from Maine, Bill Mitchell. He was like 6'8", and he was at Brown because we were waiting for him to grow into his body. If he was that big and that strong and that quick, he'd been at another university, but we were waiting. So he didn't have the greatest feet at the time. And we had these pulls, and the tackle was to pull on this one play, and it was practice. And he went towards that parapet wall, and he lost his balance. And I'll never forget, I watched Jack Charney watch him, and the blood left his face. It was pale because Mitch went right towards the parapet wall, and he was tall enough to tumble right over. And all of a sudden he fell, and he hit. And for years, when I did my tours for the players when I was coaching there in 85 and 86 and their parents, I would point out there was a huge dent in the wall. And I said, see that over there? That's Bill Mitchell's signature right there on that wall.
Yeah.
It was true.
The roof was an amazing place. The other thing, too, which, there are certain things you can't do these days was, freshman year, we'd always start, in lacrosse, we'd always start in February. And, you'd come back, we'd run for the first week, and then, you'd get out there and practice. And then all the freshmen, we had snow shovels. We're like, what's with the snow shovels? They're like, well, when it snows, how do you think that snow's getting off that roof? We would literally shovel the roof in these big snowstorms in order to be able to play up there.
I think now they have one of those little, like when a long time ago, the Patriots, where they were playing the Dolphins, they pulled out a plow.
Yeah. When the guy came in, and I remember he was going in a straight line. And he went right over where the ball had to be placed for the winning field goal.
Don Shula was out of his mind, but I think they jury-rigged or cherry dropped one of those plows up there now because there's one in the corner.
Listen, it's not a plow; it's a snowblower. That's it. Yeah.
So listen, can't plow. Yeah.
So Dom's our last guest, and the last guest always asks a question of the next guest. So Dom's question to you was,
I think you hit your mute button, Dave. I can't hear you.
Hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so you're walking and you see this magic wand. You pick up the magic wand, and it says on there, you get 3 distinct wishes. What are the 3 wishes you're going to wish for yourself with that magic wand?
Well, my mom died before she knew. She helped me through a horrible time in my life. And the first Ivy school that recruited me was Harvard. And they showed up, and I asked my counselor when I was going in, they call you out. I think it was an English class. They said, Matt, the coach from Harvard's here to see you. You looked at film at another school and asked about you, and then we showed him your scores and said, you're in good shape. So I said to the coach, I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Zitelli, my guidance counselor, I said, is Harvard in the Ivy League? He goes, yeah, Harvard's in the Ivy League.
Yeah.
I'm a public school guy,
no doubt.
all the way. So my mom was dead. She had died several weeks before that happened. And so I would love to have dinner with my mom.
That would be unbelievable.
That'd be one.
What's wish number 2?
Wish number 2, can these be like global wishes?
Whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, wish number 2 would probably, I'm going to end the last one with, I want to get as many new wishes as I can. That would be my last wish.
I like that.
The second wish would be, I'd really like to obliterate child abuse from the world. And adult abuse, bullying in the organization, but that would be my dream. And I think that's what we're working on. You and I are both working on. I thank you for that, Dave. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. So now you get to ask the next question. So the next question's actually, it's another lineman. I have another lineman coming on the show.
Who's coming?
This one went to the NFL. Jim Pine, All-American for Virginia Tech, spent
absolutely.
9 years. Spent 9 years in the NFL. He I think he ended up, he got drafted by Tampa Bay.
George's brother.
Yep, George Pine's brother. Then he went from Tampa Bay. I think he went to Detroit, And then when the Cleveland Browns had their expansion draft, he was the number 1 pick for the Cleveland Browns, was an MVP of Cleveland. And then he got traded to, I think he got traded to Philadelphia, and he ended his career at Philadelphia, and they won the NFC Championship that year. Yeah. But Jim's going to be on the show. So what is your question of Jim Pine?
I would like to ask him if what's his most courageous moment in his life? You know, when did he feel as though he was really taking a stand or doing something that he felt was most courageous?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm excited because I had George on the show already. And so now I get to get Jim on.
That's great.
And Jim is also one of the founders of the company Wheels Up. So super successful on the field, super successful off the field. And then respectively, that whole Pine family, they're just freak athletes across the board. George's son is gonna, is going to Notre Dame as a quarterback. His other nephew was one of the highest recruits at Boston College. And then Jim's daughter is an unbelievable lacrosse player down in Florida. So unbelievable what's going on. And the Pine family also had 3 generations of NFL players. 3. Wow. So pretty cool there. So last question, and this is kind of the summary of what is the Elevate Academy all about. People think like, hey, what do you want to do here? We want to give advice to kids. We want to help them. We want to help coaches. We want to help parents. We want to help business people to let's be the best that we can be. So with that being said, what's the single best piece of advice you've ever gotten and who gave it to you?
Well, I think that's a really good question. My mom gave me really good advice continuously. She was a constant coach, constantly saying, people feel the same way as you. And I go, I'm not sure about that, Mom. She didn't know what all my struggles were. But, she was just trying to always, give me pointers on how to drive. My teachers, I've had great coaches, great teachers. But, I wrote the book. And in the beginning, I was honest. I was really honest about my childhood and my experiences. And
which is hard to do.
I was being very open about my relationship because I had maintained a very dutiful and respectful relationship with my father throughout my life, even though, there were some bad things that happened when I was a kid and I saw him do some bad things. And, I just sort of put it behind me and it was just respectful and dutiful. But then I said, this is going to help a lot of people if I get this out. And I think he was pretty good with me. They were going away. One of his friends called him and read. The book was released the week that HBO made the Paterno movie because, I'm addressing the Paterno and Sandusky. So that was the spring of 2018. It was like March of 2018. The guy read the intro of the book, which sort of calls out, domestic violence to my dad. Idiot. And so, I figured I had till September when the book was going to be written to, make it easy with my dad and, make the truth with him. And it didn't. This guy ramped it up. So I said, Dad, it's not about you. It's about me. We're good now. But he's like, oh, you call me a bully? Well, Dad, when you're growing up, it was rough. But we got to a good place. And then my stepmother got on the phone. And I said, I don't think I should talk to her because they were going on a trip. I said, this isn't good. And she ripped into me and said, you could have been more considerate. And I said, well, like you were.
You could have been more considerate.
You could have been more considerate. And I said, well, like you were in getting involved with my father less than a month after my mom died. And so I was upset, and that was it. That's the last I talked to them. And so, I didn't want it to end that way. And, I love my father and I always have and I always will. And, I forgave him a long time ago. One of the best things that I heard was from that counselor in 8th grade. And he said, I've asked your dad to come in several times to build a relationship between you and him. He's refused. So when I was a young boy, I realized that, well, I'm on this on my own. for some reason, this guy doesn't like me too much. But then I outgrew it, and when you become a big football star, he liked that. He liked that kind of recognition. So anyhow, I was in the doldrums. But just ironically, I've been eating breakfast about every month when I've lived in Providence area for the last 30 years. I've tried to see Barrett Hazeltine, who you mentioned earlier. And I got to the breakfast with Barrett, and I said what happened. And he goes, oh, because he wrote the introduction to the book for me. And he knew exactly. And he goes, oh, he was like beside himself upset. And he's such a sincere person.
Yeah, no, he was absolutely upset
Oh.
because you were hurt and it hurt him.
And he goes, well, that's not love. And I think getting back to what passion's about, and I go, you're right. He said, if it was love, he probably would have said, we're good now. Are we good now? Am I a good dad now? Can we do it? And, that wasn't it. And so with that, I think that gets back to our whole theme of being in the zone, being in the moment, being able to peak perform. It all gets back to really passion, or really a deep, deep love for what you're doing and who you're with. And I think that's really what distinguishes great athletes and great teams. Obviously, they have to have the ability, and they have to
listen, it's phenomenal stuff, Matt. And what's really interesting is I've had other guests on, and it's come back to that. Two guests that pop out in my head: Tom Ryan, who's the head wrestling coach at Ohio State, won a national championship.
Oh, he's great. Yeah.
Great guy. He's overcome a lot of adversity. His son passed away when he was 5 years old of a heart attack.
Oh.
And Tommy has an.
Is he from Long Island?
He's from Wantagh High School in Long Island, and went to Syracuse for a year and then transferred to Iowa. Wow. And he talked about love. Yeah. And then Tommy Scott, another Brown football player, founder of Nantucket Nectars, talked about love. And here you are talking about that. And it's I've mentioned it a couple of times on the show. I was talking to someone about Buddhism, and they said Buddha said there are three things that you need to be successful in life. You need to be kind, you need to be empathetic, and you need to love.
Yeah, great teachers break things down into three things. And, the Bible says faith, hope, and love, which can be sort of very analogous to those. All the base great religions boil down as very comparable things. But
listen, this has been awesome. You and I could keep doing this. And Matt and I have done this. And we talk great. Like this on the phone.
Anytime.
Matt's been great with me in helping me overcome some of the stuff that I've dealt with as a kid, and I'm still dealing with.
We always are in recovery.
And I appreciate you. I trust
Likewise.
you. And I love you.
Love you, Dave. Thanks.
Elevate Academy. Before I get so super emotional, I am done for today. We'll have Jim Pine as our next guest, and Matt, thanks so much, bud.
Thank you, David.
Talk to you soon.
I'll be talking. Yep.